Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's Global COVID-19 Show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this show where we talk about various aspects of COVID-19. Today, we have a very special episode, number 255, The Story of an Epicenter. This week, the New York Times ran a 16-page special section by Dan Barry and Annie Correal that tells the story of the pandemic's early American epicenter in parts of Queens in New York City. Annie is joining us to talk about various aspects of the story and what lessons we can learn from what happened back in Queens. Of course, the pandemic is raging full on in the United States, and we have so much to talk about. You'll meet Annie in just a minute. Hi, everybody. I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here. Please share this live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Your friends can watch live or later, and tag folks who'd want to watch as well. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. Our motto, don't cancel your physical event without talking to us. We'd love to work with you on your virtual event. We've done events with 50 people and 100,000 people. We bet your event is somewhere in between those. So please get in touch. My email is here. If you haven't joined us before in these first 250 episodes, we did more than 450 guests, 250 of them women from 73 cities and 20 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. We're in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in, and our archives are at youtube.com/Sreenet. A big thanks to our producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. Please follow both of them. And please share this with your friends and family. So right now we're ready to talk about Epicenter, which was the name of the section that Annie put together, The Epicenter. And she's a New York Times reporter covering New York City's immigrant communities. So let me say hi to Annie and thank her for being here. Hi, Annie.
Hi, Sree. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I know it's a busy news day, so much going on. I see that the governor has just announced that they're going to stop indoor dining as of Monday, and the death count continues, and it's just so tragic to see all of this. Let's start by, let me asking you the first question I ask everybody, how are you doing and how's your family been handling the pandemic?
Thankfully, everyone is fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, so tell us about this special section. I will show everyone what I can of the print section by showing a GIF that was put together that shows the different sections or the different pages, and then we'll go from there to talk about. We'll see the digital edition as well. So here is the cover, and people can get a sense of the print layout. So talk about the genesis of this and why you decided to do this.
Well, like many, we were part of there was a critical mass of journalists covering the outbreak in the late spring, in the late winter, early spring, in March and April. Queens emerged as the epicenter of the New York City outbreak, which at the time was the largest outbreak in the country. So we were on the ground and connecting with people in that area to do the initial reporting. And after that, after the numbers flattened a bit, we went back and we thought that it would be important to really slow down and interview some of the people at length who lived through that period. So we took John Hersey's Hiroshima. It may be it's a sort of classic piece of literature, piece of nonfiction taught in classrooms. We took that as our model. We wanted to find everyday lives that represented the community and use their experience to really make this moment real for readers near and far.
And so how did you come up with the structure, and how did it end up becoming? Did you always know it was going to be a special section like this?
We didn't know that it was going to be a special section. That was fortunate that we were given the space to really give this a cinematic treatment. We had to find our subjects first, and we knew that we wanted subjects who would represent the major ethnic groups in this area. So many of these zip codes are more than half Latino. I'm a native Spanish speaker, and we worked with a freelance reporter, Joe Corona, who is also a native Spanish speaker. So we knew we wanted to showcase the Ecuadorian and Mexican communities in this area. We also wanted to include the South Asian population. There's a very large Bangladeshi and Indian communities living sort of intermingled in Jackson Heights and Elmhurst. And we also wanted to show a smaller but really fascinating group, which is the Himalayan population. So people from places including Tibet and Nepal. So we sort of divvied it up and tried to find community organizations, religious leaders who would connect us with people from those groups. So one thing we encountered was there was a great deal of stigma, not only grief, but also stigma, where people in some immigrant groups feared that it would be a liability to their social and professional relationships to publicly discuss that they had been affected by the coronavirus crisis. So it was very much almost like ethnographic work, understanding how the pandemic continued to have repercussions in people's lives.
How did you get past this? That sounds really difficult.
Well, trusted messengers help, approaching people through their imam, through a cousin, through someone that they know. But oftentimes we did spend a lot of time with people who ultimately decided not to work with us. So it just was a matter of patience and really using every tool at our disposal to find potential subjects. So we were using, of course, we were going through Facebook pages, professional organizations like the Taxi Workers Alliance, and crowdfunding sites like GoFundMe, which became a very helpful reporting tool. GoFundMe was where many people went to raise funds for their community, but also for individuals who needed support with covering the cost of burial, and in many cases, repatriation. So sending the remains of their loved one home or to the country that they came from. That too became a way to find new subjects.
And what about the team that came together? How many of you were on it? Talk that through for us, please.
So like you said, I cover immigrant communities in New York, in and around New York. Dan Barry is a veteran reporter covering New York City. He actually was born in Jackson Heights and has a sort of deep understanding of the different waves of immigrant groups that have lived in this part of Queens. So he initially proposed this story, and we teamed up. We also worked with the freelance reporter Joe Corona, who's originally from Mexico. We worked with Abu Taher, who is from Bangladesh and is a fixture in the community, knows everybody. We also worked with many community groups. I mean, that was the central team of our reporters, Dan, Joe, and myself. Abu helped. We were working with many community organizations. And then I should add that our data team for this and many, many other stories came in to help us to make sure that we had all of the statistics correct, that we corrected anything that at the time was accurate, but in the months since had been changed in terms of the death toll or the number of cases. So we also worked with our data team. And then photo editors, photo designers, and Todd Heisler, who is an incredible photographer, he was part of the team throughout the reporting. So in many cases, we were, tag teaming. We're going to people's addresses, and Todd would come with us and be part of the reporting. And that's what allowed us to get those really intimate portraits of subjects in their homes.
Wow. We should show people the digital version of this and tell us what the difference is when people see it online versus the other way they see it.
Well, again, we did have these wonderful designers who made maps for us. So readers in and outside of the city could see the square of Queens, the patch of Queens that we were focused on. We also had, as you can see now, there is this sort of little gallery of the 6 subjects who sort of became our way into the story. So Yamel, Dawa, Rosa, Madia, Jack, Laura. This is something that you scrolled through online, whereas in the special section in the print edition, this was printed in a column alongside the story. So these are the big photos from Todd Heisler, along with images from people's homes. We joked that they're the highest number of crucifixes per square inch in this story because many of our subjects mentioned or had a crucifix in their home. There's a number of Catholic subjects in this piece.
And tell us what we're looking at here, please.
So this is a map that shows not only Roosevelt Avenue, which is sort of the spine of this area. It also shows Elmhurst Hospital, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, buildings in the area. So if you look at the smaller yellow spots, those are the addresses of our subjects to show that they're really living very, very close to one another, even if their cultural backgrounds are very, very different from one another. So that's Jackson Heights, Corona, Elmhurst, East Elmhurst, and Woodside, which were the neighborhoods we were looking at.
And of course, for folks who aren't aware, that was one of the coincidences of this entire crisis, that a neighborhood called Corona became an epicenter.
Yes, total coincidence.
And here you are, more crucifixes, more crosses. As you can see, what are we seeing here, and how is this? So this is a closed church, so people are praying outside.
Yeah, this is St. Sebastian Roman Catholic Church. Faith was something that helped many members of this community through the crisis. We wanted to show that this wasn't just one person dying after the next. It was also a story of resilience and faith and hope. So it was just true to our subjects to represent how prayer and religion helped them through.
And of course, in March and April, we heard about the struggles of the frontline workers. Can you talk about that, please? Yes,
Elmhurst Hospital, I think, became emblematic of just public hospitals that were completely overrun by coronavirus cases. And many people were coming to the hospital when they were already in duress. They were already having trouble breathing on their own. So this created a huge demand for round the clock people were working for extremely long shifts. There was a lack of, well, according to at least one emergency room doctor, the supplies from ventilators to personal protective equipment were rapidly dwindling. The media did focus on Elmhurst Hospital quite a bit at the time, which arguably accelerated that hospital offloading some of its patients to other hospitals and more people donating protective equipment and more. So there was relief, but there was a moment when it was legitimately overwhelmed around the last week of March.
And you're saying that they thought that they were actually they were prepared for this too, and that they would make it through, but of course they didn't. And here's Wednesday, March 18th, President Trump saying, I want people to be calm because we're going to get through this. We're going to win this. And of course, none of that's true. And here we are, 3,000 people a day dying across the US. We want to go to our comments. Folks are watching from all over, and we want to bring in some of the comments. Jonathan Borstein's watching from the East Village. Jonathan's watched all 255 episodes. Apollo is watching from Montclair. Stefan from Ramsey, New Jersey. And Stefan says, Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist Todd Heisler is one of the best, so misediting his work, one of the highlights of Stefan's New York Times career. What role does photography play in telling this kind of story?
Oh, it's vital, especially because this was a situation in which we weren't on the ground as things were happening for the most part. We needed to make this place and these subjects very real, and photography was, of course, a wonderful way to do that, specifically to show the ethnic diversity for which this area is known. So I think Todd spoke of this in our in a Times Insider, sort of a look at the reporting. He spoke about the challenges of, going when you're not there in the moment, how do you represent what happened? And so this often meant going into people's homes and finding the mementos, the photographs of the people who had been lost, really focusing on the intimate details. There's a couple in our story. One of the men in the couple dies, and Todd focused. He caught this image of their silverware, which had been separated and into two containers labeled Joe and Jack. And even months after Jack's death, those two containers were still there with their names on them. So the sense of time having frozen for some of the people who lost relatives was something very poignant, and which is obviously captured very well by photography.
And there it is, Joe and Jack's containers. So sad to think about this. Vandana Menon, one of our producers, asks, do you have any advice for reporters on how to cover such difficult experiences sensitively?
Don't use Zoom. That's my maybe unorthodox advice, but I found Zoom reporting to be pretty painful, both for subjects and for this reporter. I found the old-fashioned way of calling someone on the phone when it was a good time for them and just letting them talk to be more effective than just because it's so emotional. And I don't think people love crying on camera. So patience and just giving people the time and space to process things, not pressuring your subjects. This was incredibly difficult for the relatives who had to describe specifically leaving their loved ones at the hospital, knowing that they would never see them again. Those were scenes that were critical to our story, but also incredibly challenging to recount. So, sometimes they would gloss over it, and I would just wait and come back later. And oftentimes on the phone, people sort of forget you're there. It's like the analyst's couch or something, and memories would just come back. So I think that's my practical advice. One thing that was very difficult is that we had to do some of our in-person interviews in parks and outdoor cafes, and there would be people listening at the next table. I was interviewing one of the sisters in the Lima household, which is the very crowded household in Corona. And someone came over from the next table and said, you know, I'll keep you in my prayers. And as nice as that is, I don't know if it's necessarily what a subject wants. So we did have to deal with certain obstacles imposed by the pandemic while reporting on the pandemic.
Oh, that must have make it even much harder. I like the advice around Zoom. I think that's people got lots of work done by talking to about subjects on the phone over the years, and so I think that's tried and true. And also, it helped that you've been covering Queens for all these years, and you understood the making those relationships, and those really mattered. So that's important. Let's see what else is going on. Neil Parekh from our Digimentors team is watching in Springfield, Virginia. And we had covered in our New York Times read-along last Sunday, we had read the print section. And so he's got a clip of it that people can find. Stefan is tagging Donatella Lorch. Everyone, please do that. Tag your friends so they can watch later. Mark Lee is watching from Durham, North Carolina. Linda's watching from Long Island. And Rose is tweeting, one of our producers. And Linda says, no one does data visualization like the New York Times. Fabulous to see what they're doing. And Apollo says, Eric Holders from Elmhurst, New York, the former Attorney General. If there is, not everyone will have time to read this epic story, what are maybe two takeaways of what happened in Queens at that time that is relevant today as we try to get a handle on this crisis?
I think that's a great question, because cases are surging around the country. Really, this was an example of what happened when there were not restrictions on movement and on businesses, because what became apparent by the end of March is that the virus had been circulating for weeks before it was detected, before there were positive cases. So I think that this is the worst case scenario. It's the combination of the virus circulating without controls, and also a system which was overrun by people who did not necessarily have primary care physicians, who were in many cases undocumented and afraid to go to the hospital. So this is not unique to Queens or New York. I think it's something that the dynamics are similar in other places, specifically issues around overcrowded housing. So I think that it's a bit of a cautionary tale about leaving things to the last minute, but also leaving things in the hands of individual choices, because in many cases, marginalized communities, people don't have the option to stay at home or to de-densify, a verb that has come into common parlance, de-densify their living conditions. So I think it's just a sense that if it happened once, it can happen again. So we are monitoring the situation in immigrant enclaves like Queens, like Jackson Heights and Corona. At the moment, it has not been as bad as it was in the spring.
That's good to know. But just looking at the rest of the country, it's so horrifying. Linda says, any plans for follow-up? You've just written the story, so you're only as good as your last piece or your next piece. Already people are asking.
Well, I think what'll be really interesting is to check in with our characters maybe a year from now, We have some people whose lives are still very much in flux after what has happened. Many people changed professions. They stopped driving for Uber or for stopped driving a yellow taxi. So it'll be really interesting to check in with the Chowdhury family and to see how Shamsul is how it's going for him as a mail handler for the U.S. Postal Service. His daughter is at Cornell, and she will be 1 year further into her college life under unusual circumstances. So I think it'll be really fascinating to just go back and talk to these families and see how things are going, and also the communities. Have they changed anything? What has brought people together? I think there is a much greater sense of interdependence between some of these communities. So it'll be interesting to go back and sort of see how they helped each other get through, particularly some of the immigrant-owned businesses.
Sure, absolutely. Apollo, I know we only have a couple of minutes left with you. Apollo says, did you feel like a war reporter or reporter during the yellow fever outbreak circa 1830, or I guess the 1918 pandemic in the US? How did you handle this?
I mean, I didn't feel like I was necessarily in danger. It was definitely a new thing to have to make such careful decisions about how to report. Dan Barry went into the hospital, and so it's taking risks that we usually don't have to think about. One thing, I'm glad you brought up history, because I think that one thing we really wanted to do was to make sure that these quote unquote everyday lives, the lives of everyday people, were captured for posterity. So we were thinking about, writing the first draft of history, as they say.
Terrific. I'm going to come back to you to give us a final thought before you go, but want to tell everyone that this Sunday we are doing our New York Times read along. It's with Nancy Newhouse, who was one of the most influential early editors, female editors at the New York Times, former travel editor, living and style editor, and editor of Hers Through Women's Eyes, a collection of 65 of the most memorable essays to appear in the Hers column in the New York Times. That's this Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please join us. We'll be live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We're celebrating 5 years of reading the New York Times out loud. So let's go back to Annie to just give us some final thoughts for both the journalists watching as well as everyday folks who are trying to understand this crisis.
Well, for the journalists, I think we all are facing a great deal of fatigue and resistance in our readers to reading even more about the pandemic. So I think my thought is that the fact that this story seems to have broken through some of that resistance is a sign that if we really focus on personal stories and on the things that distinguish one family from another, that will succeed. It will succeed more than cold statistics. So I think we have to keep at it and find those personal, gripping stories. To the general public, thank you for the stamina and for reading this very long story. We were very moved by the response, and I think it creates a sense that there's an appetite for not just the New York Times, but for other media to keep undertaking stories of this scope.
Well, with that, we'll let you get back to your very busy reporting day. Thank you very much, Annie, for being here. Everyone, please follow Annie on Twitter at Annie Correal. And thank you, and good luck with your reporting, and please stay safe out there.
Thanks so much, Sree. Great to see you.
Great to see you. And thank you all for watching. This was a rare noon Eastern Time edition of our of our COVID show. And don't forget our New York Times read along, which is this Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. And then we will have our friends will Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian will have She's on Call, a show that I co-executive produce. Please join us at She's on Call on Twitter, on Facebook. They talk about everything from COVID and so much more. And they have an endocrinologist as well as a registered dietitian who are going to be on to talk at She's on Call. So with that, we thank you all for joining us. Please check out the series. You can just Google Epicenter New York Times and you will find that. I also wanted to take this opportunity to tell you about our friend Mitra Kalida's terrific newsletter about New York City. It's called Epicenter NYC, epicenter-nyc.com, that you can sign up for. You can subscribe. You can learn how to support people in many of the neighborhoods that Annie and Dan wrote about. So please check that out, Epicenter NYC, and see the newsletters and learn how you can support what they do. And epicenter-nyc.com. And with that, we'll say goodbye to all of you. We'll be back. Our plan, as you all know, we were on every single day, but now we are on 1 to 2 times a week. We are planning to be on every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and then 1 or 2 other days as opportunities, as guests present themselves, as they did today with Annie. So thanks very much, everybody. And our episode with Annie will run right now. We'll start afresh on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn as soon as we're off the air. So please share, please tag your friends, and please take a listen again to this story if you missed it. And lots of comments still coming in. Jonathan says, great story. Thank you. Ellen says, great show. Thank you. See you Sunday. And Apollo says, thank you so much for your efforts and work. Sree, Vandana, Annie, and Rose, Neil et al. Thanks very much, everybody.